How's it going, everybody? This is Dave Meltzer. We're going to be here for the next 2 hours talking pro wrestling. We're going to have Raven as our guest in just a couple of minutes, like about 3 minutes. And, of course, Brian Alvarez is here as well, and we'll be here for 2 hours, as we are every Sunday night, talking pro wrestling. And we're actually going head-to-head with the WWA pay-per-view, so...
Uh-oh.
Yep, you didn't know that, did you?
Huh?
Are you going to watch that show?
No.
Oh,
If somebody's kind enough to send me a tape, I will review it, but I'm not spending any money on it.
Okay. Well, you had an interesting week this week.
Yes, I did.
Yes, you went to Portland for the TV tapings, and there weren't any.
To make a very long story short, the commission in Oregon has a set of rules we've talked about a million times on this show, basically that everybody needs to be licensed and blood tests and drug tests and all that good stuff. But the loophole is that any shows that run in Oregon that do not charge admission can run with unlicensed performers. And there's shows that run unlicensed every single week. And basically, the idea was that, and I think Frank Culbertson, the guy at WB that's in charge, basically went to the commission and asked if we run this as a TV show, will we have to, use licensed performers and that sort of thing. And they said no. And the state attorney general's office on Thursday at 3:30 p.m., while I was on the road from Seattle to Portland, decided that that was not the case and shut the show down, sent a cease and desist order. So we all got there and had nothing to do and went right back home.
So that must have been a nice drive.
It was, but hopefully everything will be ironed out and they'll tape again this Thursday. But as of right now, I actually know nothing, so we'll see.
Yeah. Anyway, any thoughts on SmackDown? Did you watch SmackDown yet?
Yeah.
What did you think?
I enjoyed it, and I sat there, and all I could think throughout the show was, all of you people that are booing The Rock now are going to be very sad someday because he's going to be gone and he's not going to return. And I thought he did such a great heel promo to the point where I actually almost felt bad for Hulk Hogan because he had been so badly overshadowed by this man. And I really enjoyed it.
I didn't like his second promo at all.
You didn't?
No. I liked the first one a lot. And the second one, the whole thing with Rock and Hogan, all I could say is that when it was over, I had so little interest in watching their match, and I had at least curiosity going in. I don't know what it was about it. I think that it was between Rock treating it like it wasn't important and Hulk Hogan not having any kind of a good comeback for Rock. I don't know. It kind of weakened it for me. We also have Raven, and he's actually already on the line. How you doing today?
Good. How you doing?
Doing really, really good. We got actually a lot of phone calls on the line already for you, and we'll get to them in just a couple of minutes. But first, I guess first thing people are going to want to know is what is your mood, I guess. I guess it's pretty positive going from a place where you were in the spotlight promotion and not in the spotlight to a promotion that's not in the spotlight, but you're in the spotlight.
To be honest, I was so miserable in the WWE. I spent 15 years perfecting, or what I thought perfecting, an art form, and they looked at it like I was out of my mind and just that I had no talent, and treated me that way. And as much as I tried to compartmentalize it, it still does a terrible damage to your psyche because you spent your entire life building for this goal. But, when they let me go, I thought I was going to sink into this monstrous depression. I really was scared I was going to be in a depression, but it ended up, like, I'm happier than I've been in the last couple of years. I'm going to end up making more money working indies, working less dates, which just shocked me to find out what I can get. And plus what the Jarretts are going to pay me, which is quite a bit. And I'll work less dates. And then working for the Jarretts is like working for ECW again. It's like, I get to be a focal part of the TV show. The majority, half the show is built around me. I get to cut the promos I want to cut. I get to do the storylines I want to do. I think it's fantastic. I really lucked out of this. Because plus also, if you look at it even further, eventually they're going to continue to let more guys go. So I would rather get in first and get in early before everybody else gets in, when all of a sudden there's a glut and they don't need anybody as between the Jarretts and the indies. So I think the whole thing really worked out well, although, honest to God, I couldn't have planned it this way. There had to be at least 10 or 15 times where I legitimately was going to quit, but I was like, how do I walk away from that kind of money? There's nowhere else to go. And luckily there is, actually.
What was the story with you going to Heat?
There's not a lot I can talk about as far as WWF, as far as legal reasons.
Yeah.
And suffice to say, in what I can talk, I would say it's just that I came up with a storyline that I thought was brilliant. Vince thought was brilliant, and Vince said, you know what, let's do it. And then between the Monday and the following Monday, he decided that it was a huge investment, and he wasn't sure if I could pull it off, which I found odd considering I've worked near top or on the top everywhere else I've ever been. But nevertheless, he said, let's do it on heat. And that way, if it doesn't work, it's not as huge an investment and as big a risk as, on Raw because of, where the ratings were and whatnot. And then 5 months later, we still hadn't started it. Finally, when we did start it, it was 1/10 of what I put down on paper. So it didn't even, it wasn't even remotely indicative of what I'd written. That being said, I still thought it was better. If you look at the ratings, Heat was at a 0.7.8. And then it jumped to a 1.2, and then once I was gone, it went back down to a 0.8. And some people would say that Lita deserves credit because she took over as commentator and the ratings went up around the same time, but I think she's been doing the commentating about a month or two, and if it was her commentating making a difference, the ratings would still be at a 1.2.
Not for long.
I'm sorry?
Not for long they would.
But they weren't. As soon as I was gone and the people knew I was gone, the ratings plummeted back down to a 0.8. That's half a point, no matter how you look at it. And it's all me because there was nothing else on that show that could be attributable other than Lita's commentary, which, whether you like it or not, it could have a potential to be something on there, but if it was her commentary, it would have stayed where it was, but once I left, it dropped back down, so obviously it was all me.
Were you at all expecting to be let go at the time, or as far as that goes, like in the months leading up to it, because there's always,
Yeah, absolutely. In December, right around Christmas time, I thought I was going to be let go.
Did you? Okay.
But then I was convinced that I wasn't. So then it came as a real shock when I was.
Because I was surprised, and usually those things.
On the wall, but then they assured me I wasn't, and then they did. So who knows?
Yeah, Just Incredible didn't surprise me, and Bull Buchanan didn't surprise me, but I don't know, it just didn't seem to me.
Bull Buchanan actually surprised me.
Really?
They kept telling me they had big plans for it.
Yeah,
but they used Bull as my sidekick in the 7 storyline, and they kept saying, no, we got plans for him, we're going to make him a player.
I don't know.
Well, hey, whatever,
As far as the TNA side goes, when are you going to have your first match there?
I don't know, probably this week, I guess.
Really?
Here's the thing, I don't think it's a necessity that I rush right into a match. I don't think I should not wrestle. I think whatever the storylines, whatever lends itself. It just happened that the first week, the thing at the end of the show. The next week, it just didn't lend itself to a match. And last week, it just, the way the show was formatted, it didn't lend itself either. It's not on anybody's thing trying to keep me from having a match or me going, I don't want to wrestle. I just think it's one of those things. But, looking at the big picture, I'm planning on being there for a long time. So, if you do want to see me wrestle, I'm sure you'll see it soon. If you don't, well, then you've lucked out.
Now, do you know, you're going to be working with, it looks like Jeff Jarrett and AJ Styles. What's your thoughts? Because I know that, AJ Styles, originally, you were not that high on AJ Styles if we go back, say, 6-9 months ago, and from what I gather, I guess you pretty much are now.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. AJ had a tryout, and for the in Cincinnati. I talked about this the other day, and I was like, this is the AJ Styles I heard so much about. I really wasn't very impressed because they said, look, no flying. We want to see if you can actually work, And by not being able to do a quote-unquote X Division style match, he was really handcuffed, and his work really wasn't very good, Now, that being said, his X Division stuff is phenomenal, you know what I mean? It's off the charts. But that doesn't lend itself to drawing money. And as much as everybody, the insiders, and everybody says, oh, you got a X Division, that's the money, that's the money. Wrestling has always been about talking to people in the seats. It's about the promos, and his promos have definitely improved because the stuff I saw that day didn't impress me at all in Cincinnati. But, his stuff on the mic here has been a lot better. He has a lot of charisma, a lot of stuff. He brings a lot more to the table that he didn't bring in Cincinnati, whether he was nervous or whatever, or whether being hamstrung by not being able to do his thing, throw off his game, or just the fact that, which I think is what it is he's improved working with the Jarretts. I just think his work's improved, and his whole package is improved, and it's something completely different. He came in there as this redheaded, opie-looking kid, you know, with no build. Now he's got a nice little build to him. He changed the hair color so it doesn't look like Howdy Doody. I mean, you know, he's brought a package to him as before where it was just, you know, a guy that could do high spots. And when you took away the high spots, there wasn't anything there.
How much, you know, this is interesting. How much, if you go in there, and a lot of people who go into WWE, except for the young guys, a lot of them have been successful at other places elsewhere, and you go in and for whatever reason they decide that they don't want to use you. Or you know, as far as that goes, I mean, the same thing could be said for WCW a couple of years ago, because there were a lot of really talented guys in WCW that never really got much of a push. What does that do? I mean, because I think I've seen guys that have kind of self-destructed and never fully recovered from, you know, kind of like, I don't know if it's the loss of ego or, you know where I'm going with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess, yeah, but, I mean, I also think that a lot of these people that were supposed to be so good really weren't that good. You know, I'll give it, well, let me think of an example that doesn't bury anybody that's going to hurt their feelings, I know. You know, there's a lot of people that were supposedly this fantastic, unbelievable, I can't believe you can't get them. I'll give you an example. When Sabu first came on the scene, right, Sabu was touted as, oh my God, this is the greatest worker of all time. 5-star matches, 5-star matches. You know, and he couldn't work a lick. And then by the time he became a better worker and he worked smarter and got the people more involved in his match, everyone decided he couldn't work anymore and he was just, you know, that his best days were behind him and that he was only a 2-star match. You know, sometimes what the so-called smart fan sees, you know, you got to be careful what you give them because they think they want something sometimes, and sometimes they really don't. And sometimes they see something that they're not looking at the big picture. I mean, they're not looking at the grand scheme of things. I mean, good matches aren't quite enough. You know, charisma's not quite enough. There's a whole lot of things that play into it, and certainly talking, because if you can't talk the people into the seats, you can't get them in there. It's always been promo-driven business. And you can look back and, I mean, talk to any old-timer, talk to anybody ever, but it's the promos that talk the people into the seats.
But there's a certain type of promo, because you and I have talked about this before. A lot of the promos that are being done, even by people who are good talkers, are not those kind of promos that talk people into the seats, but they're just extemporaneous speeches looking for a punchline that when I watch them, I think that they're like a waste of... I almost get frustrated by them because I'm thinking like, you know, you're talking and you have a good delivery, but you're not talking about anything that gets anyone excited. You're trying to build to a punchline.
Right. Well, there's two types of promos. I mean, there's a money-drawn promo that's going to put an ass in a seat, and then there's a promo to entertain. I think they have both their places on the show because not every storyline is designed to sell tickets. There's a main event match or a couple main event storylines that are designed to be your focal point, and the rest is designed to be filler. But you need that. It's like icing on the cake. You need a card top to bottom, which I think the WWE is lacking. They got a card on top, but they got no middle. They got no middle class, no bourgeoisie, if you will. But you know, so I think, like, I'll give you an example. Edge and Christian's promos. I thought they were phenomenally entertaining. You know, and they weren't going to put any asses in seats, but they were great mid-card promos when they were a mid-card tag team. But that's all they were there for. That was their position on the card. It's what worked for them at that level. When you move on to the next level, then you got to change your game. But unfortunately, people don't know how to change their game because you have writers that don't understand wrestling, which is its own strange animal. You know, they're writing TV show promos, and I still don't get this whole thing where these guys were writing for Friends and whatnot, which supposedly some of them were. Why would you leave writing for Friends to write for the WWE?
You know, Brian is now doing something that you did very early in your career because he's working for Portland Wrestling.
I love Portland Wrestling.
Yeah, and there's a guy in...
I gotta work.
There's
honest to God, not to cut you off, but that's what's missing today, no matter what anybody says, but, man, I worked minimum 6 nights a week, and usually 7, I'd say usually 6, and every third or fourth week, 7. And you work every day with up-and-comers or guys who are coming down, you know, I mean, and there's only like a couple hundred people there a night, but you learn how to work. I mean, and you can't, as we've seen in the last couple of years, you can't replace that. You cannot replace learning how to work.
You can't replace that ring time.
No.
And the other thing with the Portland Wrestling is that the nature of they only had a certain number of people on the crew, and they, you know, is that you were working like, you know, you weren't working 5-minute matches.
No, we worked like, we went at least 15 every night.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, but there was a lot of stalling and gaga, but I mean, to me,
But there's an art to learning that too.
Yeah, that's what. It's only stalling if you don't know how to do it right, or if you don't do it well, or if you're not entertaining, which is what killed stalling. I mean, it became called stalling in rest holds when guys stopped working holds and guys started, taking way too long, before they did their match because they didn't want to work because they got lazy, which is understandable, but, it's a different day now. People are paying for a different product, and you got to give it to them. But to me, I think you can spend 5-10 minutes doing a bunch of gaga if you're Jerry the King Lawler, If you're not, you can't. I mean, you got to, people need to know their limitations and what their skill levels are, and unfortunately, most people don't.
We're going to start going to the phone calls. We're going to start with...
Let me say one other thing before we go to the phone calls.
Okay.
As if anything else, I mean, if I was a bigger celebrity, I'd be on, on David Letterman or something like that. I'd have something to plug. So I have to, now that I'm on a smaller scale, I have to plug my stuff coming up.
Okay.
I am doing indies. Besides doing the Jarrett's every Wednesday, I do indies. And if you need to get a hold of me, if you're a promoter or whatever, call RF Video, Rob Feinstein, and let me find Feinstein's number. I know I got it somewhere.
215 something.
Yeah, 215, here it is, 215-353-8455. Call Feinstein. He's taking care of all my bookings for me. He's a little slow, but he's a hell of a guy. And they'll probably try and sell you some videotapes, which are damn good. Yeah, because I'm pretty much booked solid for the next couple months, but there's still some holes in the booking, and I mean, it's unbelievable that I'm going to make more money doing less. I mean, it just blows my mind, and it's great, Now,
are you going to go on any overseas trips?
I don't think I'm going to need to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why bother if I don't have to? It's like last night. I mean, but then there's still the, it's like last night I worked a show, and I don't know, just to say how different the business has changed. Sabu was supposed to be there, but I guess they couldn't make it because of the weather. They had to cancel, and the promoter didn't tell the people before the show, right? And so I'm going on last, and right before I go out there, the promoter goes, the announcer comes out and says, Sabu's not going to be here, and the people were pretty pissed. And I said something. I said, and I said to him, I said, look, I'm sorry, Sabu. And so it wasn't I wasn't scheduled to do it, but I said, look, I'm sorry, Sabu's not here. I'm gonna try and give you the best match I can to make up for it. So I didn't know he wasn't coming, and people were in the back going, oh, what a great babyface move! You saved the show. And I'm like, I didn't really do it for that reason. I did it because, which is so bizarre. I did it because it's not fair to the fans. I mean, and when I got in this business, they were all to be looked at as marks, and let's con the people, and they're stupid, and it's not that way anymore, which I'm glad. And honestly, I really felt that way. But it's kind of cool how for years, I mean, I was a bit of a, I don't know if I can say the word, but I was a bit of a dick, to the fans, which I feel bad about. But that's the way I was brought into the business, and in hindsight, I mean, they're the people paying my way. So I don't know. It's funny how the business has changed so 180 degrees from when I came in.
I had a question. How are those two tough enough guys that worked the two shows with you?
The one kid, Jonah, was his first match ever, and then he looked okay. I mean, I only watched part of it. I had to go over some stuff in the back, and I had to stretch. When you get older, you got to stretch. I remember when I didn't have to use the stretch, but and then the other kid, he looked okay too. I mean, he doesn't look like the Howdy Doody kid anymore either. He looks like he got his hair cut like a normal, like cool style. It's kind of spiky. And the people were with it. I mean, they were entertained. It's kind of funny. People, I really think people could do much more business nowadays on indies if they promote them than they could years ago, because it's like, you go to these small towns in the middle of nowhere, and they're a couple hours from any major market, so they're never going to see pro wrestling, yet pro wrestling is now transcended, and it's not like 10, 15, 20 years ago where it was, where it was a closet sport. Now it's part of the mainstream, part of the vernacular. And, and it was like, and I saw a totally different breed of fan who, even though they knew these guys were, unknowns and whatnot, they just wanted to be entertained by some wrestling matches as opposed to just wanting to see stars. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like that wrestling has now come to the point where it's like going to the movies. Maybe you want to go see a movie, and there's nothing good playing, but you'll go anyway, whatever, you know what I mean? It's become part of the lexicon as opposed to just it's either the big show or nothing,
Let's go to Ed in San Antonio. Ed, you're on with Raven.
Hey guys, Raven, I'm a big fan of yours. The first time I ever saw you was back in the Global Wrestling Federation. I used to love it when you would do a color commentary with Eddie Gilbert.
That was a really good time. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I thought you guys were
once again, I couldn't get in the big two then. I have the weirdest luck with the with the big two.
My question that I have for you is, I've read stuff and heard stories that you were one of the major partiers of all time in wrestling, but I know that you've gotten cleaned up since then. And my question I have for you is, what went into that decision to where you went from partying all the time to cleaning up your act and stuff?
Well, I mean, there was always the specter of death looming on the horizon. But I didn't see it coming for me. But and I wasn't, I wasn't that concerned about that so much as one day I actually stopped to figure out how much, like, what my daily dose, of narcotic intake was. And when I actually did the math and figured out what I was ingesting, I was mortified. I was like, I got to quit just for that reason alone. It was just there was no way. It was bizarre, And I've told people in the rehab field where I took, and of course nobody believes me, but it was an extraordinary amount. I'm lucky to be alive.
Do you think part of the reason is that when you were first brought up, you might have been surrounded more by people that did that? You know what I mean?
Nah, I hate to take that shortcut. I mean, honestly, I went to college. I was a big partier in college. I didn't get into the pills and stuff because that wasn't the scene. So maybe that's why I got into that scene, because it's part of that scene, but I'm sure I would have anyway. I always, it's really sad and pathetic, but to me, I always had this glamorous view of Keith Richards, with a needle in his arm. And I always knew I'd be that guy someday, but I also knew that when I got to that point, it'd be time to quit as well. So I don't recommend it for anybody else, and it's not a good life choice. I mean, it worked out. It worked out luckily for me. You know what I mean? But I'm one of the few. I mean, there's too many people that died from it, so I don't recommend it to anybody. But by the same token, I can't be dishonest and say that I fell into it, because I didn't, because I knew I walked right into it intentionally.
Yeah.
Okay,
and if I could ask you one more question. What was the story with, I heard something that Hulk Hogan axed a storyline with you and Kanyon?
Hulk Hogan axed the storyline with me?
Oh, remember you were doing the videos in WCW?
I don't know who axed that. I mean, it was supposed to get to me and Piper. Me and Piper planned out this huge storyline. I mean, it was hot, too. Really good stuff that we put together. I mean, we worked on it like 5 days a week for a couple of weeks to really tighten up all the details. And plus they weren't using them. And all I can think is, honestly, I'm convinced what happened, whoever did put the axe on me, is there was like the Big Ten. There was like the Big Show, Flair, Hogan, Nash, Hall. There's about 10 of them that were top guys. Then there was me, Conan, and Jericho right below that, kind of like the sixth man off the bench in basketball. And the Big Ten didn't, and DDP was one of them, and nobody in the Big Ten wanted another guy coming in there because that cuts into their top guy thing. They'd let Paige in because Paige had different connections, but I don't think they wanted anybody else in there. And if you work with a top guy, not if you just have a match with him, but if you work a storyline with the top guy, you become a top guy. And that's why I think it was axed. Who did it, I don't know, but that's why I'm convinced it was axed. What kind of coverage you get with the show?
We're on all over the country, and we're on in, I think it's 177 countries on the American Forces Radio Network.
It sounds like Radio WWF we used to do.
I actually remember that.
That was hilarious.
Yeah. We're going to go to Charleston, West Virginia, and Mel. Mel, what's happening?
Oh, guys, how are you this evening?
Doing really good.
Raven, I want to tell you, first of all, I'm a huge fan of yours.
Thank you.
And I think the WWE is a classic example of there's none so blind as he who will not see. It is their loss that you are gone from the company.
Thank you.
And, I wish you all the luck in the world. I think anybody who gets you working for them, whether it's the Jarretts on a long-term basis or one of the indie feds, just go in and work a few shows. I think they're getting somebody that's going to bring a lot to the table. I think you have a lot to offer. I really do.
Thank you.
I've watched your matches, and I've seen things in them that I remember a hell of a lot more than some of the people that the WWE crams down our throats on a weekly basis.
Well, it's a story. I mean, you got to tell a story, and it's a simple story, but you have to be creative, and most people aren't very creative. They see somebody else do something, so they do the same thing instead of putting your own particular twist or spin or whatever on it.
Well, in that direction, since you have both worked in the ring and worked on the creative end of things, do you see yourself ever making the transition into the creative end of the wrestling business, or when you're ready to get out of the in-ring thing, is it going to be like, that's it, I'm done, I'm going to walk away from it altogether?
That's it, I'm done. I have no interest in being on the creative side. I enjoy kibitzing with my friends. I enjoy, like when I was in ECW, I enjoyed coming up with stuff to add to my thing. If I thought of something, go, oh, this is pretty cool. If I thought of something for somebody else, like when I made up the Dudley's gimmick, or whatever it is. But it's not something I want to actually do. It would take away the fun of it. And then once it becomes a job, then I no longer want to do it. And also, as far as like you know, the WWF is actually Vince has already mentioned to me about. Well, this is before they let me go, but had talked about using me as a writer, and I just couldn't see doing it for another reason. Is like I don't like my ideas being overruled. I don't mind my ideas being changed and added to, and if they're not any good, I don't mind it being kiboshed. But I couldn't stand to see something that I know is good be taken and discarded because of somebody's whim or somebody's fancy. If I know it's good, like that's the one thing, Paulie. Didn't matter who came up with it. If somebody came up with something good, Paulie's like, you know what, we can use that. You know, he might tweak it, might make it better. But I'd hate to see something like some of the stuff I've come up with and submitted to them. They just look at it like I got two heads and throw it away, and I'm just thinking, you know, I could never do that. It's not something. I like to be a performer. I don't want to ever stop performing, and whatever I do after wrestling will be in the performing field. So I don't want to be behind the camera. That's I get too big an ego.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we're going to go to Jonathan in Savannah, Georgia. Jonathan, what's going on?
What's going on, Dave?
Yeah, not too much.
I had a couple questions for you. My first one, I have a question for Raven, but my first, comment was I thought that Jericho did a good job of carrying Steiner on Raw to a passable match, considering what I had heard about Tripp's match with him at the pay-per-view.
Well, it was much better than that. But also, you know, one of the things in that was just that, you know, this difference between Scott Steiner working 7 minutes and working whatever it was in the pay-per-view, like 18 or something.
But my first question was...
It's also the difference of Jericho.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to think about carrying immobile guys.
Jericho can make anybody look good. Like, he's smart enough to know if you got a guy who's... I didn't see it. I mean, I didn't watch it. But he's smart enough to know if you got a guy who's not very mobile, then you let him stand in the center and you bump around him. You know, you adapt. It's adaptability. You have to be able to... That's why, if you notice, like, as great as Ric Flair was, and he had the same match with everybody. I mean, you didn't see that until, you know, he started wrestling every week, but everybody knows it now that he had the same match with everybody. But, of course, but on a sidebar, no one will ever take away the fact that he did it. He'd go 45 minutes for 20, 30 years every night. I mean, no one will ever touch that. There'll never be anybody who can do that. I don't know how he did it. But that being said, you know, he'd have the same match every night. I always try, and I know Jericho does too, is we adapt to our opponents. Like, if I'm wrestling Steiner, I'm going to work his style. If I'm wrestling Hurricane, I'm going to wrestle his style. If I wrestle Stevie Richards, I'm going to wrestle his style. So you see a different match every time. My influence will be in there, but I'm going to work their style, so it's ensured that it's going to be a different match than if I make them conform to mine, as Rick always did.
Okay.
But I don't want to sound like I'm bashing Rick, because, I mean, what he did is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, no one will ever... I mean, like I said to him before I left, I said, you got to be Superman. I go, how did you wrestle 45 minutes a night, 7 days a week for 20 years? I don't know how anybody...
You mean physically hold up?
That's what I'm saying, physically hold up. I don't know how he did it.
I don't know how he did it without, like, you know, breaking every bone in his body and ruining every joint.
And it wasn't like he was and Andy had to travel by him. Like, people forget that not only is the ring that brutal wrestling, I mean, it's also a harder ring back then, but the travel. I mean, you get in a car, you fly, you're banged up. We're big guys. Even the smallest guy is a big guy. There's no room in coach seats. You know, and so you're squished in there. Then you got to drive, and at least when you fly with the boys, you got your buddies with you. But I guess when he was world champion, he was traveling alone, which makes it even more remarkable what he did.
Yeah.
It was it's unbelievable. I mean, it's like Lou Gehrig, you know.
Anything else?
Lou Gehrig. You know, getting Lou Gehrig's disease. You think he'd have seen that coming, huh? Thank you. I'll be here all week.
Okay, Jonathan, anything else?
Yeah, I had a question about if you caught Confidential last night and what Bob Holly had to say about the whole...
I caught it, yeah. I mean, I think, you know, and I want to ask you about this too, but I think at this point today, and what they did last night, I think that it's more, let's keep this thing going as long as we can, and maybe, you know, when Bob Holly's, you know, physically ready, they can do a match with it. I saw that last night more as kind of overplaying an angle as much as, and keeping a controversy going, as much as when it originally happened. I think it just was something that they didn't. I don't know if they expected the reaction to be as big, and one of the reasons why I can tell that they didn't expect the original reaction was because on the follow-up show the next week, they never acknowledged what happened the week before. Right. So to me, it was like, after that.
Vince is a charter. Vince loves that kind of stuff. Vince loves tough guys and everything about it. So, I mean, obviously, this is some kind of thing that Vince would enjoy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And my one real quick last question for Raven was, do you think you would have been more utilized if you had happened to end up on the SmackDown roster with Heyman writing?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, because let's face it, if Heyman wanted me, he would have put me in the SmackDown roster, right?
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think. Yeah, I don't know. It's, let's face it, hindsight's 20/20. I mean, who knows? I don't think so. I mean, I think if, but maybe Paulie would have found a way to slide me in the middle spot, and then I could have got myself over once I was there. I don't know. I honestly don't know.
You were talking a little bit earlier about wrestlers writing their own stuff as opposed to writers scripting interviews for them.
Right.
Can you talk any more about that, or is that another WWF thing?
No. That's another thing that, man, back in the day, not only did you have to be able to cut a promo, but you had to be able to write your own promos. So all the guys like Dusty and the great promo guys were writing their own stuff, which would have made it a lot easier on me in the WWE if they didn't have writers, because then half the guys that cut promos wouldn't be cutting promos, and they would have needed guys to talk, which is me. You know what I mean? That being said, I think you need to have your own input on your promos. I always liked when they said, Paulie would say, look, here's the point I need you to get across. Here's the bullet points. Get these in. Put these in your Raven style. You know what I mean? But Paulie actually knew the character so well, he could write my promos for me. If I didn't feel like doing it, or I was lazy, or I was filled up, or whatever. I think certain writers, I think Brian Gewirtz, for all his faults as a wrestling writer, writes great rock promos, and whatever, I've seen them collaborate before, and they got each other, and they know the voice of the rock combined, and they do a great job with it. That's very entertaining. So are Edge and Christians. I don't want to say anything else about Gewirtz, because I don't want to get off on a subject, but I do think they need people who understand wrestling, writing wrestling programs.
Well, as far as like the long-term week by week, not just like scripting and entertaining promo. Right. I mean, the one thing.
I don't think Gewirtz understands a money promo.
Yeah.
I don't think he understands it, and I don't think he understands I don't think he understands episodic storylines. Like, TV shows are written episodically, but not really. It's not. There's no elements that are dragged from episode to episode per se, except maybe there's one like the Ross and Rachel thing,
Yeah, for 8 years.
You know what I mean? But it's, for the most part, they just write a self-contained episode.
But the goal. See, the thing is, the goal.
Wrestling's not like that.
The goal of a wrestling show is that you have to create things to make people buy pay-per-view, which is totally different from every single thing else on television. And the other thing is that when it comes to writing wrestling, I don't think that unless you're a fan for a certain number of years, and I mean a lot of years, that you can really understand it. Because if you're in the business, you can understand it because you
I don't agree with that either. I don't think a lot of guys in the business understand it.
I
don't think a lot of smart marks understand. I don't think a lot of internet or newsletter guys get it either. I think what happens is they get an inkling of it, but unless you've had somebody teach you, or unless you've studied like there's no, and even if you do study, you're still not going to get things. Put it this way, you can read all the books you want, but unless you have a teacher to help you with it, you're not going to learn as effectively. And if I wouldn't have had the brains I had to pick, and a lot of them weren't trying to help me, I just kept picking their brain, and made them help me, So I think a lot of people miss the boat. I don't think it's just, I think a lot of the boys even get it because they grew up watching after the business had changed.
Yeah.
So what people like, this is what I always say. This is the best way to make an analogy. I watch indie guys and I go, they look like somebody who saw somebody do some stuff on TV, and they said they wanted to do that. Like, they look like somebody who's acting like somebody they saw on TV, as opposed to wrestling because they understand what the hell they're doing. Which I can completely relate to. When I started in Portland, I was like, I was real tight with the booker at the time. We used to ride together, and I was like, oh, I want to be in a cage match. I've never been in a cage match. He goes, well, we're not just going to put you in one. He goes, why? Let's make a reason. I go, well, because of this. He goes, all right, but then what do you do the next week? I go, I don't know. Well, I'll come back when you think of that. And he taught me to think linearly, you know, and he taught me to think episodically. He taught me to think linear. Taught me to think how one thing leads to another. And so often, guys in sheets and smart marks, they're not looking at the big picture. They're looking like, okay, here's a good example. Ron Killings, tremendous on the microphone. Ring work isn't quite ready yet. He's not ready to be the guy carrying the ball. He's going to be someday, but he's not yet. But all the sheets were like, man, they got to put the belt on Killings. God, he's ready. He's ready.
I never said that.
Well, everybody else did. It was all over.
I thought it was too early. But I think the whole deal with them is that it wasn't so much putting the belt on Killings at that point as much as not getting the belt off Shamrock.
Right, but then they're like, and then when they put him on him right away, they were like, oh, finally, they're smart. Then 3 weeks later, they're like, oh, he's not ready for it. That was a dumb idea.
Yeah.
It's because they're not looking at the big picture. You know, they're not seeing all the disparate elements that weigh into this, and it gets so frustrating sometimes because you look at the internet or something, and people will be saying this, and you're like, oh, you just don't get it. You know, and I hate to throw this on you, Dave, but just as an example, because this always sticks in my head, always stuck in my craw. But when I first came out with the Raven character, instead of giving it an opportunity to develop, the very first week he goes, it looks like a baby Undertaker.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? I was like, give me 3 weeks, give me 4 weeks, let me show you what I got. Let's look at the big picture. It's not, and I proved you wrong, but I mean, I wasn't doing it for that reason, and I don't mean to put you on the spot. All I'm saying is that there's an example of people making flash judgments, making snap opinions without letting things develop, although I also say this, on the other hand, the way the business has been for the last couple of years doesn't lend a lot of faith to waiting for the big picture. So, I do understand that. Dave, let me say this, though. Since I did heal on you before we went to the break, let me put you over a sec.
Okay.
I'm very impressed. Like, I hate to see anybody die, especially like the Sheik or Mr. Wrestling, but the amount of info that you put forth in the bios is just fascinating. I mean, to me, it's fascinating to read because I love our business dumps on history. They've completely, acted like the past doesn't exist for so many years that the fact you're able to gather so much information, to me, I love reading stuff like I hate to see anybody die, but I love reading, this angle did this and they did this business. I mean, to me, I think you did a phenomenal job with it. To me, it's fascinating. And it's so sad to see the Sheik or Gorgeous, I don't know why I keep saying it, the Sheik or
Tim Woods
pass away,
Well, with the Sheik, when I started doing the research on him and talking to people, that was actually one of the most fascinating characters I've ever written about.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, just because
the hardest to get info on because of that.
Yeah, well, in some ways, but I mean, as far as he had an aura about him that very, very few people in wrestling ever had. Especially with fans. I mean, it was I
had no idea he was such a good guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But the thing with him is that wrestling fans in territories that he didn't work should not have known about him because it wasn't like they had an internet and granted you had wrestling magazines, but not exactly everyone read wrestling magazines. But somehow or other, everybody knew the Sheik, and everybody knew the Sheik meant blood, and it was just, I don't know, I just found the nature of both the ups and the downs of how he got over, and also how by doing the same thing too long, ended up running successful companies down. We're going to go to James in Seattle. James, what's happening?
Hello, hi Raven, it's an honor to talk to you.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. I noticed in your last couple weeks or so, months with the WWE, you really had a change in appearance from what was sort of your trademark style. Was that something they wanted you to do, or was that something you undertook to sort of mix up your character a little bit?
Yeah, actually it was my idea. I was a little offended when I heard the rumors that they made me change my look and then let me go as a big rib. Which I don't know. I mean, it wasn't at all. And I don't think they would do that, but maybe they would. Who knows? It was, my first thought initially was this. They don't a big stumbling block for me was Pat. Because Pat liked my work, but he didn't like my look. He didn't get it. And we go round and round, about it. And Pat's a creative genius, but I maintain that he's a 60-year-old man, and doesn't understand what today's trends are. Like me and Briscoe would talk about it, and Briscoe goes, you know what? He goes, it looks insane. He goes, but you know what? I go to my kids' wakeboarding tournaments, and that's the way people dress. He goes, so, and Briscoe was always a big supporter of mine. But I thought, well, if I can't get in, if they won't give me a shot looking the way I do, maybe if I fit in, you know what I mean? Maybe if I, as the, what's the term, attack of the clones, like everybody else, look like everybody else.
See, I think that's the big problem there right now, though.
Well, regardless of whether it is, I'm looking for self-preservation.
Yeah.
So I don't doubt that, of course it is, but nevertheless, I'm looking for self-preservation. I figure I'll take the dreads out, I'll grow my hair out. Plus, I was getting tired of the dreads anyway. It'd been 2 years. It was going to be a pain in the ass because you got to redo them every 3 weeks. and then I said, you know what? And then I said, you know what? I'll try tights. I haven't worn tights. I'll wear tights. The funny thing was that everybody loved the tights because I got good legs, and they're like, why did you cover the legs all these years? And I always thought, you're not looking at the big picture. The look is intrinsic to what I'm trying to broadcast as a character. But so I did that, and by then, the writing was already on the wall, so it was too late. It was a little too late. And I'm not so sure it wouldn't have made a difference if I would have done it 3 or 6 months earlier. It might have, but like I said, I'm glad it all worked out the way it did. But ultimately, it was my decision. And then when I went to the Jericho, I was thinking about wearing the trunks as well. And I was like, you know what, Ed? I don't know. I don't feel comfortable in trunks. I feel like I'm half naked after wearing, something for years. And I don't like long tights. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go back to the skirt till the skirt falls apart. And then, since I only got one, and I can't find them anywhere, if somebody does know, call Feinstein.
And one of the
back to a commercial.
What? We're back from a commercial.
I'm saying, we just did 8 commercials in like 12 minutes.
I know. Anyway, I want to, before we went to the hourly break, you had actually just started the conversation about the cyclical nature of wrestling. And, one of the things that you said something that I've always thought, and that is that what I think happens with a lot of promoters and bookers is that they'll come up with something and it'll work. And then they'll think, well, this is what works. And unfortunately, nothing works forever. And instead of tweaking it, when the things start to go down, they don't tweak it. Just go, well, this is exactly what works. And then, it's kind of like one of those things where when that snowball starts running down, they don't know how to move the snowball up because they only know the one thing, which is at that point now taking it down rather than, you know what I mean?
Right, and they're very set in their ways.
Yeah.
And I think also, it's kind of like, in my opinion, when the WWE started running, when the business started going down, I think Vince's philosophy was, man, we got to push the top guys more. But see, I look at it the other way. I mean, I can understand that train of thought. I don't agree with it, but I can understand it. Whereas I look at it as that's when the top guys need more support. And it's two completely different schools of thought. And I think they chose the former as opposed to the latter. And I think that's something that's been done forever.
Well, the other thing also is that there's a thing in wrestling, and I mean, like certain guys can draw money and certain guys don't know how to draw money, and then there is something to that. But the problem is that even if guys who know how to draw money, just because if they are there without new people, like a guy can be on top for a long time, years and years and years, as long as there's new people in the mix for him to face.
Sure.
But if he's always facing the same guys, even if they're great, like just an example, Brock and Austin, who drew tons of money, if they were to wrestle each other in every main event for 2 years, people would be so sick of that match, no matter how good of promos those guys did.
Unless the only way you can get around that is by incredibly creative storylines.
But even that's going to run out after a while.
I'll say there are exceptions at the time frames. I mean, Dreamer Raven lasted 2.5 years before he ever beat me.
But okay, you kept your thing, but you weren't the only thing in the company at the time, though.
Yeah, I know. But I'm just saying, you can have the top guys. Okay. I want to agree and disagree with your statement. Yes, you absolutely have to change guys up, but I disagree that you can't keep the same 2 guys together. There just has to be other stuff as well. So I guess we're saying the same thing.
Okay.
I got a question and...
Oh, let me real quick question. Hey, ECW still owes me $78,000. How do I get that?
You got to file for a claim because you might be able to get you won't be able to get all of it, but you might be able to get some of it because they're kind of coming to the conclusion of that thing.
When do I have to do that by, you think?
I think you may have had to do it by before, but I would certainly do it real quick.
Yeah, all right, cool.
Okay, Brian.
I know that there's certain things you can't say about WWE that are negative, so You don't necessarily have to say anything.
I can say them.
In regards to booking and everything you've been talking about, do you think Vince McMahon is a genius?
I think. Wow, thanks for putting me on the spot. I think Vince is a businessman, is a genius. I think his infrastructure. I mean, let's face it. If WCW would still be in business if Vince was running the business end of it. You know what I mean? Because WWE has took as big a hits as they have. The hits that they've taken in their audience and whatnot, and you know, and financially, they survived. If anybody else was running it, they'd be out of business, just like WCW was. But they didn't, because Vince is brilliant when it comes to that. I think when it comes to storylines, I honestly don't know. I've never sat in a booking meeting with them. I've never written with them. So I don't know. You know, I mean, but I will say he's a genius at business.
I think he's a fantastic promoter.
And he's a talent. He's an on-air talent. Absolutely tremendous on-air talent.
Yeah.
And I will give the guy all the credit in the world. I mean, let's face it. You know, this is all about egos. Everybody's got to have an ego to do something. You know, to be cheered or booed by perfect strangers. To have that need or desire, there's got to be something wrong with you. You know, and you have to have some kind of ego for that. The fact that Vince is a billionaire and he's willing to urinate himself on TV out of fear from Stone Cold, I think speaks volumes. I think, you know, anybody who ever said, oh, Vince humiliated their character to this, well, look, nothing's more humiliating than urinating yourself on TV. And so I don't have a problem doing something for a guy who's willing to humiliate himself as much, if not more, than he wants to make me do, per se.
Okay. Let's go to Adam in Binghamton, New York. Adam, what's going on?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing good.
Adam.
I had a question for Raven about the Tory Ninja angle. Could you comment on that?
Oh my God, she was atrocious. Bless her heart, she was a sweet girl, but she was absolutely god awful, and she wanted to be a ninja, you know. So that's what we did.
That was her idea to be a ninja?
Yeah, she wanted to be the ninja.
Wow.
And how come it was dropped soon?
You would be so surprised some of the stuff you find out. Like, I'll give you an example. Like Benoit, for example. I like Chris. Chris is a great guy. They did a thing, like, I remember when Chris was doing a lot of brawling, and everyone's like, man, they need to make Chris stop brawling. They need to have him in scientific matches. That's where he shines. Well, guess what? Chris likes being in the brawling kind of matches. I mean, maybe he doesn't now. I mean, this wasn't WCW back in the day. You know, when we had more, you know, we spoke more to each other. We saw more of each other. But he liked that kind of style. He liked the brawling style more than the scientific, yet all the fans were like, oh, man, they're missing a boat. Make him work scientific. That's what he needs to be doing. You guys are screwing him.
Actually, I think he needs to be doing both.
Right, but I'm just saying, but at the time, I don't know what he likes now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the time, he liked that. Like the Disco Inferno. Everyone's like, man, he needs to stop doing that goofy act. They need to stop making him do it. He likes being goofy. I mean, it's not that somebody's making Disco be goofy. Disco likes being goofy. That's just who he is, you know?
Right, and also, you had a match on Raw a few months back with Jerry Lawler and Memphis, and they had like that count-out finish. You recall that?
Yeah, absolutely. Apparently
Lawler wrote about that in his book.
Yeah, apparently he healed on me in his book, the bastard.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, well, let me tell you what really happened. I love Lawler. I'm as big a Lawler mark as they get. That was the day I approached Vince with my 7 storyline idea. And I said, Vince, oh, I know what it was. They had me on commentary, and Vince had told Brian the writer before they could do something with me, he was going to have to talk to me. So I went to Vince, and he said, look, it's a disconnect. He goes, I hear you talking, you sound like this really intelligent guy, but then you look like a freak, and it's a complete disconnect. So I tried to sell him, you know, the whole thing. I said, look, you know, Kurt Cobain would, you know, and not that I believe I'm Kurt Cobain or anything, and he's been dead 10 years, but just for an example. You know, his songs were completely, they were very hard to figure out, but I mean, you could get a sense of them. But if you did an interview with him, he made perfect sense. So I thought, everybody has this dual personality. You know, people have a schizophrenic nature. I didn't think it was a problem, but he did. So I said, well, look, you know, I'd like to be the character. I don't want to commentate. I will if you want me to. And he goes, well, what I did, for the character. And I laid out my 7 storyline, and he loved it. I mean, actually, it was bowled over. Like, I was really, like, I mean, it really made me feel good that it was so good that he actually, at that point, was like, maybe I should put you in a writing staff. You know, so I felt really good about myself. And he goes, you know what? We're going to have you get beat by Lawler tonight. You know what? We're going to have you quit on Heat. And then, instead of getting beat by Lawler, you're going to walk and take the count out. It's all him. I would never politic not to lose to Jerry, especially in Memphis. But So then I got to go to the road agent, or to the agent, which is Briscoe's always been in my corner, and say, look, here's the deal. You know, I'll put it all over in a heartbeat. I feel really stupid saying this, but Vince said he wanted me to take the count out. I don't want to go against Vince's wishes, you know, after I just had this really good talk with him. So Joey's like, look, he goes, not that I don't trust you, but let me double check. If it's true, we'll you know, I'll tell the king. So he double checked, went to the, and, you know, found out that I always tell the truth, and told the king. And then the funny thing is, the reason I'm really surprised that the king was upset about that was then, after that, I mean, the king, like, he was totally cool about it with me and him were discussing it, and I told him everything that happened, and then he even suggested, I go, what do you want me to say on the commentary to, but I think it was the same show, or, yeah, I think it was the same show where I also had to bury him on the commentary.
Yeah, it was, where you were, like, saying, like, all you do is talk about puppies, you don't talk about the wrestling. Yeah.
That was all his stuff. He gave it to me. He said the line about his ex-wives or something, all the boys like, man, I can't believe he said that about the king. He gave it to me. So I never had any indication that he was hot whatsoever. And when I found out about this, I was really bummed out. I mean, you know, it hurt my feelings, and it bummed me out. But it bummed me out more that he thought I would do that, but I can also understand why he would, being in this business. But I didn't. You know, I'm a huge king mark. Always have been, always will.
Also, I guess you can't comment on Triple H and his influence over booking at all, or can you?
No, I can't.
Okay, I can. What do you want to know?
I want Raven's perspective on it, you know, because he's been there and seen it and all, but I guess he just can't talk about it. I'm not going to pressure him or anything.
Yeah, I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks a lot, guys.
Okay, you're very welcome. I'm going to Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and Mark. Cherry Hill. Mark, what's up?
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Raven, I just want to say it's glad to have you back, you know, on the air. I mean, I've been good friends with you for a long time. I don't know if you remember me, Mark.
Oh, hey, what's up, man?
You remember me, right?
What's up?
Just glad to have you back, and glad that you're doing well and everything. Glad that, you know, yeah, you put, you know, like you were alluding to before, your past demons aside, and now I guess I'm going to have to order the NWA TNA every Wednesday night.
Yeah, I think the show's getting better. I mean, I enjoyed the last couple shows. You know, the apparently the Sheets didn't, but I enjoyed it.
And you're going to be in town Saturday night, correct? You're working for Meanie?
Yes, I'll be working for the Blue Meanie on Saturday.
Okay, I hope to see you at the show then, if possible.
See you there, man.
All right, man.
Okay, let's go to Justin in Oil City, Pennsylvania. Justin, what's going on?
Hey, guys. Raven, I heard you on an Observer Live from February 2000, and you were just, you know, raving about WWF Creative because they were going really good.
They were at that time.
They were. If you notice, Vince Russo, it's still, everything he put into place was still playing out.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so 6 months later you get there, and then 6 months later the bottom starts to fall out. And I'm not trying to get you to bury anybody, but at what point could you, you know, tell it was starting to go down and they've really lost something? I know Sean Waltman on Observer Live mentioned the XFL took a toll on everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of factors, you know. I think the XFL, I think it's all the usual things that you think it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And anything more, I mean, I think it would take me 20 minutes to elaborate on everything, and then I'd probably have to get into some stuff I'd rather not talk about.
All right, I understand. One angle that you saw and you thought, uh-oh, this is the beginning of the end, because we sort of saw that with, like,
Kurt Angle,
Hunter and Stephanie,
Kurt Angle, Hunter and Stephanie.
Yeah, the love triangle that just ended with the most horrible ending, and we thought, oh boy.
I think there was at least, you know what though, we got used to it. I mean, that seemed to occur on a regular basis at some point. You know, the alliance, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, but you know, there's always other factors that factor into things. So, you know, nothing's as black and white as you think. And but that being said, I mean, I'd rather really not go into any depth into this.
Okay, well, then while you were there, you did have some highlights. What was your favorite thing you did there? I don't know if it was the ECW deal in Atlanta or some of the hardcore stuff you did with Rhino or Crash Holly.
Crash Holly. I loved that.
Yeah, very entertaining. One of my favorite people to watch.
Yeah.
Just even when he's doing nothing, he's entertaining. He's just a goofy little bastard. Yeah, probably the Rhino match at the whatever pay-per-view it was, which I think is the greatest hardcore match there's ever been. And many people think so too. And then, but I think, like, if you go back and look, and this sounds really vain and egotistical, but there was about 5 or 6 of them that I would put as the top 5 or 6 after that. Ones I had with Crash, Al Snow, and I forget who else. I mean, because I put a lot of creative thought into those things. You know, I didn't just
go... You had a run on Raw where it was like right after you won the hardcore title, and every week it was something different.
Yeah, I wanted to make those things special. And in fact, that's how I won Vince over, because apparently I came in with some heat with Vince, and they threw me in the hardcore division, and then I got over, and then Vince was actually, that's how I won Vince over, but I mean, you know, it didn't last, I guess. But I would say that was probably one of the 5 best matches I've ever been in, was the Rhino pay-per-view match. And then some of the other ones, I mean, you know, those are damn good hardcore matches. I mean, entertaining, there was something for everybody, they were creative. Me and Crash took a crossbody into the Zamboni pit, filled with sludge. I mean, just entertaining stuff that, you know, I'm very proud of for being creative enough to think of.
My favorite one was where you and Al Snow went behind the ramp, and then the pyro went off, and they put the camera back in. You guys were both lying there dead. Yeah,
I mean, the creative stuff. We came up with a lot of great stuff that I thought was entertaining as hell, and we'd always be in that position where they'd cut us for time for something more valuable. And so I was doing 7-minute matches in like 3 minutes sometimes, and I got over with Briscoe because he'd always be like, "Man, can you do it in 3.5?" And I would. And he always knew he could count on me, that if he needed something fit in, I would. And yeah, I mean, imagine what we could have done if we'd had more time with all that stuff.
Okay, one last question. Now, the deal where they brought you in teaming with Taz against Lawler, did you like that, or did you have any different ideas?
Remind me of that again?
You debuted, like, teaming up with Taz in a program against Lawler to start. I guess if you don't remember it must not have been that good.
No, I mean, a lot of stuff, you would be surprised. Like, I mean, when I got into business, and I talked to old-timers, I'd bring up stuff.
Oh, my God. I know where you're going with this. And you remember their programs better than they do.
Shocked that they could not remember these great things that were so intrinsic to my childhood. You know, and then I was like, how could you ever forget that? And here I am 15 years later, forgetting stuff from 2 years ago. It just, man, you know, I've been doing it 15 years, you know, 250 nights a year. It kind of, a lot of it blurs together, a lot of it doesn't. If it stands out, I mean, it's there. If it didn't stand out, a lot of times, you know, I got to dredge the memory, and the memory's not so, not the greatest tool anymore after abusing it for so many years with drugs. But I do know what you're talking about. Actually, me and Taz were actually a good little team, and but we had 2 different philosophies. I like to be creative, and he liked to keep it real simple. So, you know, I would have self-destructed eventually anyway.
All right, thanks a lot.
Okay, we're going to go to Sean in Washington, D.C. Sean, what's going on?
Hi, Dave, Brian, Raven. Raven, first of all, just to back up your theory on the heat ratings, when you were on Heat and doing the run on Heat, my friends and I always made sure to watch Heat, and since you've been off, it's kind of like, you know, I can miss show. So, but my question was, who do you see as the most promising younger wrestlers in terms of what you were talking about?
Say that again?
Who do you see as like the most promising younger wrestlers in terms of drawing money with the promos and working a style that draws the crowd in as opposed to just high spots? I mean, who do you see as like the best up and coming team?
Give me, I don't have a roster in front of me. I mean, I'll see, it's kind of a tricky question because how young do you want to go? Obviously, Jericho, I think has far more potential than they've never used him to his fullest capacity.
I agree.
I think Hurricane's got a ton of potential. You know, there's one thing between having potential and also drawing money. It's 2 different things. You know, it's kind of like, if you go back, everybody thought Kramer was like the biggest deal on Seinfeld, but, you know, if you wouldn't have had Seinfeld there as the glue to hold it together, it wouldn't have been the same show, even though everybody's like, more Kramer, more Kramer. Same thing with like Happy Days is my big analogy. You know, everybody thought Fonzie drew the house, you know, that it was all about Fonzie, and that's why people were watching. But once Richie Cunningham went off the show, it was over. Because he brought that, he was the glue.
He was the stability.
He was the reality base in it.
Yeah.
So, whether someone's going to fulfill that, it's hard to say. There's a lot of guys with potential, Hurricane being one, off the top of my head. But whether they'll actually get there is a whole other thing, because whether they can take the next step, whether the office lets them take the next step, there's a lot of factors. Like Ron Killings, promos are already there. You know, and he's got that money-drawn pro. He's got the ability to talk somebody into the seats. When his ring work comes up to the same level, it's going to be phenomenal, you know?
Yeah, and so who else are you looking forward to working with in TNA?
AJ Styles, actually.
Yeah.
I think he's got a ton of potential. I think the things I can teach him and the match we can have, because I'll have a match more along his style. So I think that's going to be really good. And Jeff, of course.
Right. Well, great. It's been great talking to you.
Cool.
Okay, we'll get one more call in, and then we're going to have to let Raven go. We'll go to Mike in Long Island. Mike, what's going on?
Hey, how you doing, Dave?
Doing really good.
Raven just brought up Happy Days before, you know, about when he was talking about Richie Cunningham left. Now, if somebody did that on Raw, or Vince Russo said that on TNA, you'd say outdated reference. You know what I mean?
Not when it's more of a reference to, it's not a reference as far as something that he would say in a promo. It's something, it's an analogy.
If somebody else used that analogy, you jump all over him.
No, I wouldn't.
Now, listen, real quick, I want to say.
If he used a Carol O'Connor, I would say if it was relevant to the subject.
Listen, you have been saying in the newsletter, and I've been reading on the internet, everybody's like, you know, Shawn Michaels, they're pushing him like he's a great wrestler. None of the fans today even remember him from when he was around in the early 90s.
I never said none of the fans, but a lot of the newer fans from, you know, that came in '98, they really don't have a, like they sort of know the name, but they really don't have a feel for Shawn Michaels.
Then, and you're saying he's just a skinny guy or whatever with a bad haircut. Then you go in your newsletter and say, yeah, Benoit got a big pop in Canada.
I never said that he was a skinny. I have made fun of his haircut. You're right about that, though.
Can't fight later. Let me know.
Go with me on this.
Before I go.
Okay. I have made fun of his haircut, though. You're right.
And then you say the fans really don't remember him. And then you wrote in your newsletter.
I didn't say the fans don't remember. Well, actually, I've said that a lot of fans don't have a understanding of him.
Okay.
He was before their time.
All right.
Okay.
Then you say in your newsletter that Chris Benoit was wrestling in Canada or something, and he got a big pop because people remember him from Stampede. That's 15 years ago. They don't know Shawn Michaels from 6 or 7 years ago.
No, they know him from being a local guy. When he was wrestling in Edmonton, I believe, or Saskatoon, when I made that reference. And they do feel that he has a tie to the local culture.
Can I get one more question for me, and you guys can argue later?
Okay. Go ahead.
He doesn't have a question for me.
No
He wants to argue with you.
Okay, no question. Okay.
Give me another caller.
Okay, let's go to Greg in Buffalo. Greg, what's going on?
Hey, guys, how you doing?
Doing really good.
Hey, Dave, listen, you have to get Raven on again because he is a really good guest. I think
know.
He ranks right up there with Tom Zink.
I think he's a lot better than Tom Zink. I really do. Tom Zink was really great the first couple of times, but he didn't have the staying power in my mind.
Right. My question for all of you guys is, first of all, for Raven, I was at the November to Remember back in '99 where you came back. Why was that main event cut so short? It seemed like for a pay-per-view match.
Dreamer?
It was an extremely short main event because I remember some of the other ones, like the Anarchy Rules main event with RVD.
You mean the show in Queens?
This was the one at the Flickinger Center out in Buffalo. The first one you came back to was Return of the Sandman. I'm sorry, Return of the Sandman. That was the one.
My first one back was in Queens, where I helped Dreamer win the tag belts.
Right. I'm sorry. With the pay-per-view though, why was the main event the 6-man cut so short? Because
I don't remember what it was. You're gonna have to refresh my memory.
It was you, Sandman, and I think it was Dreamer against Just Incredible, Landstorm, and Rhino.
I couldn't even tell you. I don't remember. Nothing stood out about it. I don't remember anything about it.
Okay.
I have to see a tape.
You know, every company that's in wrestling, the one thing that I realized is that, with the exception of Noah, which is basically maybe a little bit above where it was a year ago, but not greatly above, every other company is in worse shape now than it was a year ago. And maybe UFC. UFC may be above it as well. But everybody else, even like Pride and K1, which in December I would have said are way above it, they're really not.
Yeah.
So, not very...
All that talk about cyclical business may have something to do with, whatever we're talking about. Now the whole world's in a down cycle.
Yeah, but you know what? You know what's funny is about cyclical business is that when WCW went down, WWF was booming.
Yeah.
And when WCW went, so it's like that was incompetence. I mean, there's cyclical. There is the cyclical theory, and then if you look at wrestling historically, it does hold up. But what I think is what we talked about earlier, that guys kind of get, like promoters kind of get kind of get in this thing of comfort zone, so to speak, or, you know, this idea works, so we're going to keep working this idea, and then you work the idea till it doesn't work anymore, and you think...
And then everyone around the world copies stuff that doesn't work anymore.
Well, you know,
that's why it goes down.
Well, one of the problems is that people that copy don't differentiate between what works and what doesn't work.
Mm.
You know, they copy the bad stuff as well as the good stuff. Anyway, we're going to go back to Greg in Buffalo. Greg, what's going on?
Hey guys, okay. I have a question. I recall watching a Vince McMahon interview. Maybe it was on like a Raw from like, I'd say like the late '90s, or in the interview he said how in like the mid '80s, right after Ted Turner, right after he bought the Atlanta Braves, he invited Vince down to watch a game, had him in the skybox, and supposedly he said to him that you need to sell to me now, like he tried to buy him out, right? Is that true?
I think it's exaggerated.
Okay.
I do know that Ted Turner did, because wrestling was doing such big numbers on his station. Ted Turner did want to own a wrestling company.
Okay, now let's say this.
Because he made an offer. You know, him and Watts were going to go into a partnership.
Right.
But it ended up falling apart before it ever went anywhere.
Was that with the UWF or no?
Yeah, with the UWF.
Right. Now my question is, let's say, this is purely hypothetical, let's say he did, let's say Vince did sell to him, and he took over from like the operations of the then World Wrestling Federation.
They would never get along, and Vince wouldn't sell, so it's hard for me to imagine what would happen, because,
right,
you know, it's like Vince, because of who his father was,
right,
you know, the last thing Vince is ever going to do, he's never going to sell that company because he wants his kids to have it.
Right. Well, let's just say that he did. I know it's hard to assume, but like, would you think like since it was his people who ran WCW into the ground, do you think that would also be run to the ground? Then it would maybe spread, or it would sort of evolve into the territories again.
The thing with the problem with the territories is the territories were never coming back as long as you had national cable.
Right.
That's what killed the territories. It was an inevitability. I mean, there were people. I mean, Terry Funk knew probably in '75 that the territories were all doomed, because that's when he sold. You know, he sold territory to Murdoch and Mulligan.
Right.
I mean, they knew it. They knew it. I tell you, when he knew it was when they had the Spanish International Network, which was you know, they used to have wrestling from Los Angeles, and when the Spanish International Network had a station that hit Amarillo.
I remember Roddy Piper mentioned something like that in his autobiography.
Yeah, well, he was working for the LA promotion. And Terry Funk was a fantastic heel in Los Angeles doing a racial gimmick where he would against Chavo, Guerrero, where he would, and whoever else was there, where he would like insult Mexicans in the worst way possible.
Right.
And in Amarillo, of course, you know, which was heavily Mexican-American population,
right.
You know, the Funks were heroes to the Mexicans. You know, they teamed with Ricky Romero and the whole bit. And he realized that when those people in his territory started seeing him playing heel elsewhere,
over there,
that eventually it was going to be real bad. And so he needed, you know, he knew what was happening, and he knew that the Amarillo territory couldn't survive it. And none of the territories would have been able to. It doesn't matter whether it had been Vern Gagne or Vince McMahon or Ole Anderson that had gone national, or Ted Turner or Bill Watts. Inevitably somebody was going to, and inevitably either that person, you know, but the territories were going to die against someone who went national. The only question is if that person went national, wouldn't have self-destructed as well, you know, if they didn't get NBC and they didn't have Hulk Hogan. And that's the question that I don't really have an answer. It depends. You know, I think some of them might have made it, and some of them might not have.
Right. My other question is, I always read the Tom Zink column on his website, and needless to say, it's always a laugh. How, like, from his years in the ring and all that stuff, with some of, like, the allegations he makes, I won't say to who or about what, but how dead on do you think he is?
It depends on what you mean. I mean, he's dead on about some things, and other things, you know, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know that he is on some things. He is dead on, though.
When he talks
on the stuff I think that has to do with his own personal experience, I think he's pretty accurate.
Right, but what about like what's happening with like the current product and stuff like that? With like,
I haven't read a lot of his stuff, but I mean, as far as I don't think that Tom Zink is alone in thinking that there's a lot of problems with the current product.
Right, and with the wrestlers themselves, probably, or who knows? But another question I have is, this is my last one. Of all the autobiographies that are out there now, which one do you think is the best to read out of all of them?
Foley, Dynamite Kid, and Luthez. Are there any I'm missing, Brian?
I don't think so.
Those are the three that stand out in my mind.
What do you guys think of the Roddy Piper one? And
it actually depends on what you're looking for as far as how into the business. Because if you want stuff like with drugs and everything, then you got to read Dynamite's book. Because Foley is
that is excellent, actually.
Yeah, because Foley doesn't discuss it, and neither does Thez. If you want history, Thez's book is the one to read.
Okay. And what do you guys think of the Roddy Piper book so far, if you read it?
I read the Roddy Piper book. I liked it.
Okay.
I liked the Piper book. What I liked is because, unlike the Hogan book, when I was reading the Piper book and his stories about his career,
right.
Of course, the weakness was that the book largely ended around 1992, 93.
Right.
But when I was reading about the L.A. days and the Portland days, that's what happened. Those stories were, what happened. Whereas with the Hogan book, I remember what was going on during his career, and it was nothing like how he said it.
Right. That's right. I remember some of that stuff too. I read that one also. That's basically about it. Thanks for the time, guys.
Okay, very welcome. We're going to go to Aaron in Las Vegas. Aaron, what's going on?
How you doing tonight?
Doing really good.
I just got a couple quick questions. First one, with Hogan and Austin both being back now, how quick do you think they're going to rush to try to get that match to headline a pay-per-view? And do you think like SummerSlam would be a good time frame for that?
I don't think they're going to wrestle.
You don't think they're going to wrestle? Just because I heard Hogan talking on Bite This on Friday saying that it's like too big a match, it's a money match, it's a WrestleMania type match, it has to happen, and that's like one of the.
Well, I'm sure Hogan. I'm sure Hogan would want to do it because it's one more fresh match for him.
Yeah.
I don't know if Austin would want that match though. I mean, that's
Vince would want to put it together.
And then you got to figure out, how do you do the match? Austin didn't want the match a year ago. I don't know where Austin's head's at right now.
Just because it is a fresh matchup, and I think it would be one that, fans could probably get into just because it never happened before, and I think they could.
You're right. And I think the correctly promoted it would do well just because it's never been done before. But I remember a year ago, there was something, and it was, I think, in a tag or something like that, and Hogan and Austin were in the ring together.
Didn't they do something when the cameras went off and they teased?
No, well, they did that. I mean, Austin stunned him in one of the shows, but no, they did a match on TV where they were in there with each other, and the crowd pop was so disappointing, and I'm going like, oh my God, Hogan's in the ring with Austin, and they really didn't pop for it at all. Not to say that if it wasn't correctly built up, they would, and everyone knew at that point Hogan and Rock was the match, and Austin was working with Scott Hall.
Right.
So,
with it.
I mean, I think that it's a money match if Austin wants to do it.
Yeah, that's what he was saying on Bite This, that it's, definitely one of the big matches that he's got left on the agenda.
I wouldn't do it now, though, in this run. I would, if I was Hogan, I would do the matches he's doing, and I would go home for a long time and then come back and do that match.
The other thing I wanted to ask was about Kevin Nash, where, it doesn't look like there's a clear-cut favorite to be Triple H's opponent for a title match at WrestleMania. I think him and Nash are going to do some weaseling to try to get those two together for the title match at WrestleMania.
I think Nash would like it, but I don't know if they can pull that off, only because, people will say it's too soon.
Who's your guess as to who's going to be Triple H's opponent for WrestleMania?
Right now it looks like Booker T, but, that's going to change. I got a feeling that'll change between now and then.
Right. All right, guys, I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks.
Okay, very welcome. We're going to go to Ed in Houston. Ed, what's going on?
Ed?
Oh. Whoa. Frank. Frank.
Yeah, whatever happened to John Arezzi?
John Arezzi's living in Nashville.
Oh, he's not in the wrestling business anymore?
Not at all, no. I think he might be, he's doing something having to do with country music, but I'm not exactly sure what.
You think they'll all caught up with him for all the people?
What? Well, Brian.
I'm here.
Yes. I don't know what's going on.
What's going on?
I don't know. But, anyway, okay. I think we're not going to be taking any calls for a couple minutes. Brian, as far as, what's your thoughts on tomorrow night's Raw? I mean, where do you think they're going with that?
I have no idea. I'm going to be interested to see what they do with Goldust, because really that's the only thing I remember from last week was the electrocution and thinking that he was going to kill himself in his hotel room and wondering what this company was doing. So I guess we'll see.
Not too bad. How are you?
Doing really good.
Okay, I've got a question. Actually, I had a question about books, but the guy a few minutes ago actually asked it for me. But anyways, I have a question about WWE and what they're doing in terms of the brand extension, in terms of roster movements. Now, it looks like with Austin coming back at No Way Out, what I'm guessing, my personal guess on it, is that they're going to have Austin jump to SmackDown and have something change up, because the way it works out, it looks like things are going to be lopsided in terms of star power.
On SmackDown, I wouldn't be surprised to see him go to SmackDown.
Yeah.
And it is way too lopsided. I mean, the good thing about him going to SmackDown is from his perspective, all the guys he likes to work with are on the SmackDown.
So who would that be?
What? Edge would be a good one. I don't know that. Of course, it seems like a lopsided trade, though, doesn't it?
Well, it seems
It depends on what they do with him when he gets to Raw.
Yeah, but I think to them it would seem like a lopsided trade.
Yeah, I think it'd be more than just Edge then. If they did that. But I think Edge would be a good one because of a new, fresh opponent, and I would have him come in to see if you can make Edge the guy.
It's too bad they couldn't do that with Booker T because he could easily be in that role, in Edge's role, if that were the case.
Yeah, well, they may be trying that. Anything else, Jeremy? Because we're like, I hear that music, which means we're just about out of time.
Okay, you got any other book other than the ones you mentioned that's any good?
Tributes. Lawler's book's pretty good.
Read that one. That wasn't bad.
Top 100, John Molinar's book's pretty accurate.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay.
Take it easy.
Okay, very welcome. Okay, we are totally out of time. Brian, thank you very much.